Hey, what is up, people of the internet? Welcome back to Movies Good, Internet Bad, a celebration of the cinema uploaded right here to the internet, the place that hates it the most. I'm Cory, that's Shane. It's an emergency episode. The Acolyte is finished, Star Wars is ruined, everything's over. Shane, how are you, sir?
I'm good. But Cory, before we start,
Yes.
first off, spoilers for anyone.
Yeah.
Um,
Spoilers, subscribe, like, notifications, all that crap. Go for it.
but have you ever heard the story of Darth Plagueis the Wise?
Let me do this.
Darth Cavis.
Darth
I just
Cavis.
want to point
Wow.
out that I was right from the very
Oh,
first
God.
episode
Here we go.
that we
Lord.
reviewed. I said that
This is
Darth
such a
Plagueis would be
YouTuber
in
meme of
this.
you.
It was. I said I would hate it, but I thought that's where it was going. I think you're gonna laugh when I say this, but
Oh, boy.
I think that they're going to lead this into Plagueis in some way.
Yeah, you think so?
I think they
Okay.
are, and I am very anti cameos. And then it happened, so I just wanted to say that I was right, and I'm gonna cut it in so that people remember.
Yeah, make sure to put like a big banner up on Final Cut across the bottom of the screen that says like
Shane was right.
Shane was right or something. I think I can do that actually while we're recording. This could
That's
be
all
fun.
right.
I'm not
But
going
yeah,
to.
what did you think? Let's get so Cory and I have not told each other what we
That's right.
thought. Normally we talk a little bit after the episodes because we record much later. But we just finished watching this and we told ourselves we would not text each other about what we thought of the episode until we talked about it. So this is us talking about it. So what did you
Uh,
think?
so first of all, I'll say that distance makes the heart grow fonder, and not texting you about it. I missed your scent, and I missed your musk, and all that Anchorman Ron Burgundy stuff. But uh, where the fuck was this the rest of the season? That's my question. I
Yeah,
thought it was significantly better directed. I thought it had emotion. I thought it had great action. It introduced new stuff. It had the cameo member berry stuff, but like not hitting you over the head with it, and not that it gets in the way of the episode.
yeah.
I thought it was really good actually.
Yeah, I would go with pretty good. Maybe not really good, but I
Well, for
enjoyed
for
it.
you, that's we're about the same at that point.
No,
So
I did enjoy it. I have a few issues with it. We'll talk about it. But I think overall, yeah, I agree. It was like even from the get-go, I was like, oh, that's where the budget went. It's like, oh, there's a space fight, and it's like, oh, the $180 million was spent on the finale. But it's weird that, it seemed like everything kind of, like you said, I think in our last episode, it felt like she kind of had this idea of what she wanted to get to, and then getting there was just a struggle, right?
a little bit, yeah.
So yeah, I did enjoy it. Obviously, everyone's gonna freak out about Darth Plagueis being in there. It's
Which
a
is so
big
dumb because it's
moment.
4 seconds.
Yeah, I mean, it worked for me. It was fine.
Yeah, I thought it looked great too.
Yeah, yeah,
And doing it where it's like in a shadowy kind of thing, you can hide potential bad CGI or whatever. So like, I thought it was done intelligently, and like I said at the beginning, it didn't detract from
agree.
the main story with the main character. It wasn't a Luke Skywalker at the end of the Mandalorian moment
I
where it
was
takes over the whole story, right?
I was honestly shocked at the restraint. There was no big leading up to it, no big like huge swell of music. It was just
Mhm.
like, by the way, that's
Yeah,
Darth Plagueis.
and
All right,
usually that sort of
back to
stuff,
the episode.
it's like a post credit stinger, or it's
Yeah.
towards like the end of an episode. This was like maybe what 10 or 12 minutes in,
Yep.
or something like that. It
Yeah.
was very early on in the
Blink
episode.
and you
So
miss it. If you had like looked down at your chips or something, you would not have seen that scene.
yeah, yeah. Same thing with the back of the head cameo that we got at
Mm-hmm.
the end of the episode,
Yep.
which
Yep.
Leslie Headland is a little liar. She said we wouldn't see Yoda
Yep.
in this season, and there he was. So
Yep.
uh, to get into some of the story stuff,
Yeah. Let's do that.
I had a lot of concern going into this episode because the last episode was all flashback, and I said it on the show that I think that they kind of slowed the momentum down a little bit, and I still stand by that. And I think that if
Agree.
they would have shrunken down what they did with the flashback at episode 7 and gotten back to this stuff it would have maybe hit even harder because some of this stuff hit real hard.
Yeah,
And not everything did, but some of the big swings really worked. Um, Especially all the stuff with Soul. I thought everything with Soul was done really, really, really well. Uh, you know, Kiadi Mundi still doesn't know that the Sith are around, and
yeah, it
Star
didn't break
Wars is
canon
not
at all.
dead.
It had a full explanation for everything, right? Of
Yep.
course it did, because nobody waits until the end. They just make assumptions halfway through a show.
Right.
Uh,
3 episodes in.
but yeah, I agree with you on stopping the momentum, because the beginning of that episode was the exact end of episode 6. So it's
Yes.
almost like just a insert, like cut insert this other episode in.
Yep.
And I think it was I didn't talk about this last week, but I think what would have been nice looking back on it now, knowing what we know in the finale, is if episode 7 was not all flashback, was it? But was instead, well, it could be flashback, but not Brendock flashback. Was instead an episode fully devoted to Saul, his entire like upbringing through the Jedi, getting to Brendock, and afterwards, right? I think if you told that whole story over the course of episode 7, then episode 8 hits you like a ton of bricks, right?
Mhm.
And a lot of
It's
shows do
interesting you say
this,
that.
right? Like a lot of shows will do this where they'll pause and they'll give you a full character episode.
Yeah.
And then after that, like you're really connected to that character. And I wish that episode 7 had done that rather than just repeating what we got in episode 3.
So it's interesting you say that because you bringing that up makes me realize that everything from the minute the fire happens on Brendock till the first episode of this series, you see none of it.
Yep.
You get none of the relationship
Nothing.
between Soul and Osha. You get none of
Yep.
the Jedi upbringing. Nothing with. She obviously had a little bit of a history with Yord, who R.I.P. None of that is explored.
Yep.
But we dedicated 2 episodes to telling the same story twice, which I don't want to harp on that too much because I thought the finale was quite good, and that's what we're here to talk about. But I kind of wish that maybe this could have been episodes 7 and 8 of
Yeah.
the show, or maybe
Yeah.
half of episode 7 and all of 8, and then give everything a little bit of extra time to breathe. But yeah, Lee Jung Jae did a great job.
He was great.
Is this the first time that we've actually seen someone get force choked to death?
I think we've seen in Empire Strikes Back, we've seen maybe one of the Imperial officers die. Apology accepted, Admiral.
Oh
He
yeah,
dies,
yeah,
right?
yeah. Okay, yeah.
Pretty sure he dies.
But like a Jedi going down from a
Yeah.
force choke, that's
So
pretty significant.
people say Leslie Headland doesn't know Star Wars, and then she puts a bleeding kyber crystal in
Met a
her
kyber
Star
crystal,
Wars
yeah.
show.
It was
Like,
dope as hell.
man, it was so cool to see.
And the visual of it,
Really
as
good.
soon as it cracked open, I knew something was going
Mhm.
to happen with it. And then you saw it turn red on the inside of the hilt. And then when she actually ignited it and it was blue, and then it slowly turned
Yeah.
red as it got to Kymir's face, I thought that was extremely
Yeah.
well done. And that's something that has been in Star Wars lore for a very long time,
Mhm.
right? The idea of bleeding a kyber crystal when someone turns to the dark side, or the inverse where Ahsoka Tano kills an Inquisitor and then bleeds the crystal clear so that it turns into the white lightsabers that she uses later on. But we've never actually really like seen it
In live
not even
action,
like
yeah.
in animation, but
Yeah.
in just in general. So some pretty cool wish fulfillment there. So you got a Jedi getting force choked to death. You got a kyber crystal being bled from blue to red. You got Darth Plagueis in live action for the first time, and this is all in the show that a lot of people hate. Like,
Yeah,
it's kind of funny when you think about it,
It's
right?
very funny. Because this is probably the most EU heavy show we may have ever gotten in terms of
Yeah.
references to legends and other EU stuff. And yet everyone hates it and says that it's not Star Wars, and Leslie Headland doesn't know Star Wars, and blah blah blah.
Well,
But I do
to each
think
their own.
that we talked about this last week, that the finale can hopefully leave a better taste in people's mouths.
Mhm.
I thought the finale was one of the stronger, if not the strongest episode. I don't think it's perfect. I have a
No.
lot of the same quibbles that I had The dialogue and acting is still a little underwhelming. It continues my like one of my least favorite tropes in prequels, which is a character will say something because the writers know what happens in the subsequent
Are you
entries.
talking about the senator?
The senator who's like,
Yeah.
one of your guys will turn and you won't be able to stop him. It's like, oh, did you read the script too? Have you
It
seen Star Wars Episode 3 as well?
it reminds me of it's one of the Austin Powers movies because they introduced time travel in either the
Mm-hmm.
second or third one or whatever. And someone tells Austin Powers something that's going to happen, and he goes, "Yes, that's true."
Yeah.
It's kind of like exactly the same
Yeah.
thing
Uh,
that's going on here. It's like, ah, you're
just
right.
a blatant wink at the audience.
Yeah.
And then it also had that same issue with the cutting in the middle of a scene where it like doesn't give the scene time to breathe or exit. It just cuts to
Hmm.
the next one. There was one really blatant cut to Coruscant where I noticed that
Mm.
immediately, where it was like we're in the middle of a scene and then we're on Coruscant, and there wasn't any build up or like exiting of that scene. So I think some editing tweaks need to be done. Honestly, if you just held on those scenes a little longer and maybe put a little music swell or something like that, I
Mhm.
think it fixes it. I don't think it's actually structural. I think it's the
Yeah.
way it's edited.
Yeah,
Um,
I will say credit where credit's due from the editing. There's one part where Osha and May are fighting,
the
and it's
crosscut.
either their hands that cross
Hmm.
or their legs or something, and then it smash cuts to the two
Yeah,
lightsabers.
that match cut was really well
Match cut
done.
was really nice.
Yep.
And God, that lightsaber duel between Chimere and Soul,
Was good. Liked it a
and
lot.
they had some bullet time, some
Hmm.
Matrix style stuff in there, some different and unique force powers that we've never really gotten to see before. And I love that about Star Wars. Like one of my favorite things growing up watching the movies was always okay. In this one, the force or a lightsaber can do this, and then in this movie we add this thing, and then in this
Hmm.
one, and then by the time you get to the end of episode 3, there's a
Hmm.
ridiculous amount of stuff that people can do with the force, and then it's almost become like a time honored tradition to add new force tricks
Yeah.
to people's sleeves. And I thought there were some really cool ones in that fight. I also love the idea of Vernestra having like force telemetry, where when she's on the planet, she can, you know, vibe off of the planet and see what actually happened there or whatever. So she knew exactly what went down with all this stuff
Yeah.
before covering
Yeah.
it up, which is very
Hmm.
spicy.
Yep.
Um, Makes me wonder, Shane, because we've talked about this a couple times now. Is there going to be a season 2 of this show?
I think it is set up for one. I mean, clearly, right? Like,
Yeah, if
ends on
Disney
a
wants to green
pretty,
light it.
yes, pretty
Yeah.
big cliffhanger. I wonder, how the reaction will go from this finale, and maybe that will cause people to want more because it does leave a lot of hanging threads that I think people are very interested in. I mean, Darth Plagueis is literally in the show. Um, that Vernestra cover up is kind of interesting, and you
Mhm.
wonder why she's doing that. Maybe I mean, clearly, like she was the cause of the scars on his back, right? Is that
Oh,
the
her
what
I
we're
think it's the
hinting at?
idea. Yeah. Yep.
So maybe she's covering up her wrongdoings. So I think that's interesting too. I wonder with how much explosion we got throughout this season if Disney's gonna have the balls to do it. What I will say is I think overall this season's like a 6.5 out of 10 for me. I don't think it's great. I think it has its moments, but how many shows have we seen just in general where season 1 is fine and then seasons 2 through whatever turn into awesome television,
Dude,
right?
Breaking Bad is my perfect example of that. Breaking Bad's first season was only 7 episodes long. It got cut short due to the writer's strike of 2007. Nobody really knew what it was trying to be or where it was trying to go, but they stuck with it. And now, 9 out of 10 TV critics that you talk to, that's their best show of all time. You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
so you got to have
Uh,
faith in some of that stuff and trust the
yeah.
process. And I personally would much rather see a second season of this than something like a second season of Boba Fett or Obi-Wan Kenobi
Yeah.
or one of those shows that kind of just spun its wheels a little bit.
Yeah, I
Um,
agree.
Although it's actually kind of interesting because I felt similarly at the end of Obi-Wan Kenobi to how I'm feeling right now, because
Agree.
the finale for Obi-Wan was really strong and it had
Yep.
some great character moments, some good lightsaber fights. It was like that's where the money went kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then this kind of mirrors that to a degree. And I think if you would take, I don't really know. I hate being the person that brings a problem to the table but doesn't have a solution, but I'm going to do it anyway. I think if you can figure out a way to condense the flashback stuff significantly down and let this show breathe a little bit more, keep it at
Mm-hmm.
8 episodes, even if the run times are the same, but
Yep.
just slash that flashback stuff like into a third or half. Um, I think that you have like a really solid show. You know, is it Andor? No, but what is, right? I
Yeah.
mean, uh, at this point, when it comes to television with Star Wars, 7 out of 10 is kind of what I hope for.
Yeah, it's true.
As sad as it may be, right? That's kind of what I'm at least expecting, and if it's anything better than that, it's just like a nice surprise to me. But at the end of the day, completely inoffensive, entertaining. I will absolutely revisit it whenever it comes out on 4K disc because I think it's going to look and sound a lot better
Yeah.
than the Disney Plus stream. Um, but yeah, just
Yeah.
nothing controversial
No.
like all these chuds on the internet will make you think. It's just it's so dumb. This
and
echo chamber that everyone lives in these days doesn't
and the
make any sense.
number of complaints that were solved by the finale,
Yeah.
it's amazing to me. Everyone, this breaks canon because, oh, well, Anakin is, not a big deal anymore because they created these girls. Well, it's like, well, Darth Plagueis is right there, so he's got to, have something to do with it, or learn from that, right? So,
Well,
like,
he wants to learn from it.
exactly,
That's his
exactly.
whole
Like
thing, right?
like this is the origin of that,
Hmm.
right? So
Yep.
it's not breaking anything. It's instead enhancing it. The Kiadi Mundi thing, like obviously at the end of the day, the Jedi think that it was Saul that did everything. So Kiadi
Right.
Mundi is going to think the Sith are extinct, right? So all of
Yeah.
these problems are solved as we thought that they would be, but people can't seem to wait till a show is done to wait to judge it, but whatever. But I will say that looking back on the whole season, what you said I agree with, which is let that show breathe a little bit more, take out some of the flashbacks, because you know the best shows on television, the best ones devote so much time to character
Yes.
and less time to plot, right?
Of course.
And that's why I think Andor works really well because it sets up every single character. You have
Mhm.
entire character arcs like Cyril going to his mom's house, right? Like you're
Mhm.
spending that time figuring out why Cyril is the way he is. It's because his mom has, mistreated him and held him to this crazy high standard for his whole life.
Yep.
So he's like desperate to make something of himself, right?
Yeah.
So if you didn't have those scenes, any scene with Cyril, you just think like, why is that guy weird, right? And this is kind of how I felt about this show. Is like a lot of people are doing things like the Soul and Osha connection that we're constantly told about, but we're never actually shown it,
Mhm.
right? I said the same thing about Rogue One, where we were supposed to care about Jin and her father, but we never saw them together very
Right.
much in the movie, so it's hard to
Yep.
care about that connection. Felt the same way about Saul and Osha because that turn at the end would have been so disastrous if you had
Mhm.
set up throughout the whole season how close they were, as she was growing up through the Jedi Order. And,
Yeah.
it's that little tweak. It's 15 minutes of devoting
Mhm.
just character work that
Yep.
sets up so much more emotional payoff in the end. And I don't feel like Star Wars gets that. There's not
Mhm.
enough character work. It's so much on plot, plot, plot. And it's like that's not what TV shows are for.
Right.
The best TV shows you've ever watched, all of them are character studies. Every single one of them.
Mhm. Well, they're character studies, but then they also, when the oh shit moments happen, they mean something
Mm-hmm.
because of all the groundwork that's been laid.
Agree.
You know,
Yep.
when something goes down on The Sopranos or on Breaking Bad or on The Wire or anything like that, the reason why it hits like a ton of bricks is because those shows take their time and they get
Mm-hmm.
you invested into the characters that you're watching on the screen. Um, Star Wars has a little bit of an issue with that, and you know, it's Rogue One did it, Marvel's Eternals movie did it. You know, take two of these characters and just get rid of them, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And focus the time on the real core group. Like maybe this is controversial, but I don't need to see a Wookiee fight with a lightsaber.
Yeah.
Like I would sacrifice that to be able to get more character stuff between Soul and Osha, so that way in this episode, when Soul tries to tell her that he loves her, which is like
Mm-hmm.
big no Jedi stuff, and
Yep.
then she force chokes him to death, like holy shit, man,
Yeah.
that hit pretty well, even without it being developed.
Yep.
Imagine if it was right.
Yep.
Like that's kind of like the what if I think that we're getting onto here.
Yeah, and I'm gonna make a controversial statement here, and it's
Oh,
like,
here we go. Yes,
what is the
get
point
us
of
canceled.
having Yord and Jackie in this show if they were basically just like plot fodder, right? Like we didn't really get anything meaty or substantive with either of those characters that like developed any other character, right? We don't know much about them, and they didn't really have much of an impact on Osha or May, so why are they there, right? uh
It
so
felt like
I
they tried for like 12 seconds for each of them, right?
yeah
Like they were like, hey, Yord has a history with her. Anyway, moving on. And then
yeah
they had that one moment where Jackie had that really great line to her where it was something like, it's not about your failures, it's what you
yeah
survived. You survived a lot or whatever. Great little line of dialogue in there. But then they just moved right away from it. And then
yeah
all of a sudden, she's dead,
yeah
triple flambe with a lightsaber. And,
yeah
that was the end of that. So
yeah
I don't know, man.
they could have spent so much more time on just I think they needed to reduce the characters a little bit,
Mhm.
the number of characters, not focus on. Honestly, you could have just focused on May, Osha, and Saul for 90% of this show, and it
Yeah.
would have worked, I think.
It could have been like a Ray Kylo Luke Last Jedi thing
Yeah,
because
something
that was
like
obviously the
Kimir,
strongest
of
stuff.
course, too. I
Well,
liked
sure,
Kimir.
because
Yeah,
you need a
yeah,
bad guy, yeah. But
yes, yes. But
um,
yeah, again, just focus on character. It's not hard. I mean, it is hard. Let's,
well, it's
but
very hard.
the idea is not hard. The execution
Yeah,
is hard.
that's the thing that us idiots on the internet don't really understand is just how gosh darn difficult it is to pull stuff like this off.
Yeah,
So kudos to everyone involved. For making something that was coherent and not a total train wreck.
yeah.
Um, which it could have been very easy to do. We've
Mhm.
seen that before with plenty of other shows and IPs out there. Um, how did you feel about all the way at the end when Osha and Kymir are holding hands slash lightsaber together? Is that like is it meant to be romantic or is it just
I
like a
I
we're
think it
bonded
is.
kind of thing?
No, I think it is, and I think it's one of those like, the dark side allows you to do this kind of
Hmm.
thing.
Yeah,
But again, like I don't think that was set up well enough. We got one episode of them together, and then suddenly, no, I'm gonna go be a bad guy and train with him.
yeah.
But
Although I did like the character motive there, where
yeah,
it was like, let my sister be, wipe her memory or whatever. I'll go train with you.
yeah,
Like she almost becomes like I think she feels guilt because she got to live her life for 16 years or whatever,
yeah, yeah,
and now she's trying to give May the opportunity to do the same, and she kind of puts herself in a prison. Which again, just like almost everything else with this show, really great ideas,
hmm
terrific stuff on paper, and like even talking about it, I'm convincing myself that it's good, and then I'm like, oh, wait a minute, it wasn't perfect, but like,
yeah,
yeah, just like one little tweak here or there, and it could be something really special. So I'm kind of hopeful that they give it a green light for season two, and they
yeah.
they lick
I
their
think
wounds and take the feedback and make something really good the next go
Yeah,
around.
I think the issues are fixable. Um, I do think it needs a little bit more time to work through those issues. It does feel like the script is maybe a little bit rushed. But I think like the pitch is strong. For like, if you were to explain this show in a pitch room in 5 minutes to Kathleen Kennedy, I can totally see why she would greenlight it, right?
Mhm.
Like the
Oh yeah.
ideas are very strong. I just don't think it quite had the execution that it needed. And but again, we've seen this so many times with television, like Parks and Rec. Season one is universally regarded as a total failure and everyone hates it. And then season two, they said, okay, we're going to change XYZ. And then it worked. Everything clicked.
Mhm.
The
Yep.
Office, same thing, where they're like, wait a minute, Michael is super unlikable in season one. We're going to make him likable. And it fixed the whole show.
The whole
The
show.
show, starting from
To the
season
point
two,
where
is
when he went
incredible.
away, it almost felt like the show just ended on its
Yeah.
own,
Yep.
even though it
They
kept
made,
going.
yep. Yeah.
Yeah.
So again, that's television. We're in this weird streaming era where everything has to be this limited series, 8 episode thing, and that's it. Like that's all we get.
So
But like
I'm curious
television's never been that way.
I'm curious there. Do you think that a show like this should have more episodes, or do you think it should just make do with the time that it was given?
Um, I I think it had enough time to tell the story that it needed to tell. I just don't think it used the time effectively.
Okay.
I think you could have the same number of episodes. I think you could have extended the episodes for sure. They did feel a little bit short, especially some of the ones that were chopped in half and turned into
Mm,
2 episodes.
34 minutes
Everyone
here,
complains about
55
the
minutes there.
runtime. That
Yeah.
like I'm not a big like I don't care what your runtime is as long as
Me
you're
neither.
using it effectively. But in this show, it felt like it needed more time to breathe
Mhm.
between plot points. It needed more character work, and in that regard, I think that longer episodes would have helped it. But
Yeah.
again,
I just like when people come in and they're like, "Oh man, it's only 30 minutes. This
yeah,
sucks."
yeah,
Like,
yeah,
watch The Bear on
yeah,
FX.
yep,
26-minute episodes that rip your freaking heart out
yep,
and give you all the anxiety in the world. If some of those episodes were longer than 26 minutes, you'd have a brain aneurysm by the time the show was done because
yeah,
of everything that it's putting you through. Like
yeah. I
the
guess my
runtime
one
talk is
wild
silly.
my one wild card here is like if you gave them 60-minute episodes, would they use it more effectively or would they continue putting their effort in the wrong places? So I don't
Right.
know.
Like, well, okay, so look at the first episode of Ahsoka.
Hmm.
It's like 53 minutes.
It did not need
And
to be 53
and
minutes.
all that everyone said when that show came out was,
So slow.
why is this paced so awkwardly? Why is it
Yeah.
so slow? Why is everybody taking 35 seconds in between one person talking and the other person talking?
Yeah.
So it's like, make up your mind, man. And that's proof positive right there that the runtime thing isn't the answer to the problem. The
Yep.
answer to the problem is creating a good rhythm with dialogue on set, doing a good job with the edit, and having a tight script.
Yep.
That's
Totally
it.
agree. Totally
It,
agree.
it, it goes back to that saying where it's like, oh, I've watched a 90-minute movie that felt like 4 hours, and I've
Hmm.
watched a 3 hour movie that felt like 45 minutes.
Yep.
It all depends on how it's paced and how well it's put together. And, that makes or breaks what you're looking at.
Yep. The runtime discussion is just so exhausting. And movies too, right? Like
Yeah.
everyone complains about movies being too long, but like look at like Dune Part 2 and I think that movie could have been longer and it would have been just fine, right? So
Yeah.
whatever works. It's different for everything.
Oppenheimer made like $1 billion,
And it's 3 hours long, and
3 hours
feel
long
like
with,
that movie is perfectly paced.
and there's no action in it whatsoever.
Nope.
It's just people talking in rooms for 3 hours. So
Yes.
with like one explosion,
And it's fantastic.
and it's fantastic. Yeah. So who knows? So to put a bow on this, you said you feel it's kind of like a 6.5 out of 10
6.5
season
sounds
for
right.
you. Okay.
Yeah, I'd give it like on a Rotten Tomatoes score, I would give it positive, but like just positive.
Okay.
Just barely positive.
But encouraging, I would
Yeah.
say.
Yeah.
It showed me that Lucasfilm still has some interesting ideas,
Mhm.
and it's just a matter of figuring out how they want to execute on them to make stuff that's truly great that isn't made by Tony Gilroy. Put a
Yeah.
There's
Just put
always an
Tony
asterisk
Gilroy
there.
on everything and it'll work.
Well, I heard a rumor that they're interested in having him and Bo Wilmon come
Yeah.
back to
Yeah.
do other Star Wars stuff that's not Andor once
Yeah.
Andor is over, which
Please
will
happen.
certainly be interesting. But while we're looking to the future, the next
Yes.
one that's up is Skeleton Crew.
Hmm.
You have any idea how you feel about that one right now?
It's volume and Mandoverse, so my thought is it's not gonna be up my alley, but I will watch it and give it a fair shake. Like
Yeah,
without any of these, I hope it's good, and I'm not going to go in assuming that it's bad. Like
sure.
my one of my favorite Marvel movies, if not my favorite Marvel movie, is Spider-Man: Homecoming, which John Watts did.
Watts. Yeah.
So maybe he's got that sauce, right? I don't know. We'll see.
It's hard to say. The idea and the premise of it on paper, again, I don't want this to become like a Star Wars trope where something's good on paper and then doesn't end
Yeah,
up
it
actually
might
being
be.
good. But the idea of it being kind of like an Amblin ET
Hmm.
throwback, Stranger Things in space kind of thing that has been tossed around is an interesting concept.
Hmm.
They have a great director core for it. Daniels are in there, David Lowery's in there, John Watts, Bryce Dallas Howard, Lee Isaac, like there
Yeah.
a lot of good people that are
Hmm.
involved in making that show. So who knows? Maybe it'll be like a nice surprise holiday season hit, and then the big boys will come in with Andor season 2 in 2025, and they'll save us with bricks and screws. Cool. Good stuff, man. Well, let's take this one home. We've enjoyed covering this show, but I'm excited to talk about some other stuff. I think we're going to do one more postmortem where we kind of discuss all of the Star Wars shows
Hmm.
and kind of rank them. But aside from that, we're moving on. We're going to see Twisters this week. We're very
Yep.
excited about that. We're going to do a review on the channel of that. We've got some other ideas. House of the Dragon is still pumping. Alien Romulus is coming out soon. Believe it or not, it's been a year since the Barbenheimer explosion at the box office. So we may do a video talking about that. So if you're interested in any of that, go ahead and subscribe to the channel. Like this video if you enjoyed it. Drop us a comment and let us know what you thought of this episode of The Acolyte and just the series in general. If it was a hit, if it was a miss, if it brutally murdered Star Wars Quentin Tarantino style and buried it out in a ditch in Las Vegas. Whatever your thoughts are, let us know. And until next time, we will see you guys in the next video.